has also joined us in the room. So then can we just start, let me see, where are we? Just remind members of the requirement to declare any interests they may have in relation to items under discussion today. Andy?
Party Trustee, Chair and Private Sector Landlord, thanks.
Okay, Paul?
And owner of a rented property, so
That's
declaring
grand.
interest with regards to private tenancies bill.
That's grand. Okay, we're going to move on then to item agenda number 2, which is apologies. Have we any apologies for the meeting this morning? No, no apologies.
Stephen Dunn will be a bit late.
Okay, so Stephen's coming, but he's a bit late. Okay. Move on to agenda item 3, which is the draft minutes. Members, you'll find the draft minutes of the 11th of November 2021 at page 23. Are members content to agree the minutes as drafted?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Agenda item 4, which is chairperson's chair. Hold on, I start that again. Agenda item 4, chairperson's business. Members, for those who were on committee at the time, you will recall that we held a Zoom stakeholder event with young people regarding some of the clauses of the licensing bill. I would propose that we aim to do the same for the gambling bill. We commence oral evidence on sessions on the bill next Thursday. So this event would likely be in early to mid-December. Our members agreed that so that the committee team could go ahead and get started with the engagement team on that. Yeah, I think it was really beneficial and really useful whenever we did have that with the young people. So happy enough with that, yeah? Okay, all right. Moving on then to agenda item 5, which is matters arising. Members, you've been provided at page 34 with a departmental response in relation to the Fuel Poverty Task Force. Cross-departmental meetings are currently ongoing between senior officials from both DFC and DFE and key stakeholders to explore options for mitigating the impacts of rising fuel prices this winter. Officials have kept the Minister appraised of these meetings and considerations on how the department might mitigate against the impact of increased fuel prices and fuel poverty more generally. An oral briefing to the committee relating to fuel poverty payments has been scheduled for the 2nd of December. Any comments or content to note? Andy?
Yeah, Chair, and I appreciate obviously the department have some mechanisms in place, but again, I would emphasise that I feel there is a need for a fuel poverty task force to bring in more outside agencies such as the National Energy Action and other bodies. And also, if we look at the likes of the Northern Ireland Housing Executive, we're talking about fuel poverty, but we have a housing executive stock and also a private rented stock that is that has inefficient or inadequate insulation in many areas. So this needs to be all-encompassing, and maybe some of the measures that they're looking at as part of a task force wouldn't be to address the immediate pressures or problems, but more the long-term strategy. We obviously heard last week in our briefing around the scale of financial injection around energy efficiency that would be required. So there are areas there that should be being looked at and considered by a wide range of stakeholders.
No, absolutely agree, 100%. Any other members, any comments on that, or content that we move on? Okay, content, okay. Then if we can turn to page 36, there's a departmental response in relation to fuel poverty proposal, a perfect storm. The Minister is due to meet representatives of Advice NI and National Energy Action NI to discuss the current fuel crisis. Again, any comments on that? Content to note. Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, just for myself, Chair, and I'm getting a bit frustrated on this. Obviously, the Minister confirmed during the debate on the 2nd of November that there is a Barnett consequential in relation to the UK Vulnerable Household Scheme, and from that 13.7 million has been derived, and that she would be intending to bid for the full amount. Asking questions to the department as an individual MLA, I'm getting nowhere, so I'm just wondering if the committee would agree to write to the Minister to ask for a firm response. Can the Minister leverage that funding now, or will she have to wait until the January monitoring round? Where are we? And also, I would like more information. We're going to get a briefing on the 2nd of December, but the true reality of it is people out there now are already having to choose between heating and eating. We've seen the stark reality of that in the BBC Spotlight programme on Tuesday evening, and these proposals are needed immediately.
Yeah, look, thank you. Sean, did you want to come in?
Andy, just on that point, we did write last week on the 13.7 million bids, so we were getting a response on it.
Dear Sean.
Okay, all right. We'll move on then. Nobody else has want to ask anything on that. If I could ask you to turn then to page 37, where you'll see a departmental response in relation to amendments to the DWP computer system. Members, at a briefing session on the 14th of October, officials advised us that it was not possible to provide a definitive timescale or costs associated with changing the universal credit computer system to retain the £20 uplift for people claiming UC. After that meeting, we wrote requesting details of the time taken to develop and implement changes that the department had previously asked the DWP to make to the Universal Credit Computer System. The department now advises that while changes have previously been requested, this particular change to the system is unique, as the department has never asked DWP to implement a different standard allowance rate for people claiming benefits in Northern Ireland. Officials would caution against direct comparisons of the time taken to implement a previous change and this unprecedented request to change the standard allowance rate for people claiming universal credit here. Members, again, any comments on that or content to note? Sorry, Andy, go ahead.
In most I'm content to note, Chair, but I just want to place on record my frustration of, to a sense, we took people to the top of the hill and left them there with the whole bid around the monitoring round. I appreciate that the Minister had to do something, but it became clearly obvious as we received further briefings that the mechanisms, the scope, the IT systems were not there, and that the Department were well aware of that. So I'm just a bit frustrated at the whole process of this.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and you're right, but we were also aware that this was going to be, I mean, any of us that were around, certainly in the last mandate, whenever we were discussing welfare reform, knew that our systems were not compatible in changing. So I think there's a burden there on all of us as well, but I get where you're coming from. So do. Members happy that we move on? We could turn to then page 39, where there's a departmental response in relation to the HC1 health claim form. Work coaches proactively provide information about a range of additional support available, including help with health costs. The first contact teams in each of the 35 jobs and benefits offices and case managers in all of the UC service centres also provide advice about the support available and information available in each individual UC online account. Individuals wishing to make a claim for help with health services charges can download the form using the link provided. The form can also be found by searching for help with health costs on NI Direct website. The forms must be printed off, completed, handed in or posted to the local Jobs and Benefits office. The form can also be obtained from locations such as doctors' surgeries and dental practices, and from local Jobs and Benefits offices. To make the HC1 form more accessible to people claiming universal credit, officials are completing work to provide a direct link from the UC webpage. Again, members, any comments on that or content to note that?
Just maybe share a timeline on when that direct link will be available, because when I raised this issue, there are people out there that are continually being caught up in this, and I think the letter obviously supports what we had written to the department about the lack of the whole system being intuitive, so it really needs to be addressed sooner rather than later.
Thanks for that, Kelly. Right, Kellyanne, please.
What Andy has said, how do you know about this unless you know about it? So if there is that intuitive link put onto the system, that will certainly help people to know that that benefit is there and it is their right to have that. But as Andy has said, we need a timeline. I don't want to be fobbed off by saying that they're working on it. We need to know when this is going to happen.
Okay, no, we can write and ask that. Thank you. Okay, members, we'll move on then. Page 41, where you'll see the departmental response in relation to the support for mortgage interest security for loans bill. Repossession of the property by the mortgage lender is a default event for the purposes of the SMI loan agreement, and as such brings the agreement to an end and requires repayment of the loan to the department. Lenders are regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority in terms of how they deal with mortgage contracts and repossession cases. Where a property is sold at an undervalue, there may be insufficient equity available to repay the loan. Repayment is limited to the amount of available equity after any prior ranking mortgages have been repaid. In such cases, some or all of the loan will be written off depending on how much equity is available. Securing an SMI loan by way of statutory charge provides a mechanism to secure recovery of the SMI loan where there is available equity to recover. The bill does not change the general position on repossessions. I know, Kelly, this is one that you had brought up. We can bring Kelly in. And I know you brought it up in the chamber as well on Tuesday.
Could we ask for a clarification on a default offence? So repossession, as it says there, is by the mortgage lender is a default offence. But what happens if the person has missed payments? You know, when does that default event kick in? I still think, to be honest, that as government we should be listed as a creditor against any as an outstanding amount of money that is owed, and as long as there's equity, that seems to be that their money will be repaid. But repaid by who? The loan contract is with the person who's in contact with the government, not the mortgage people. So it's just a wee bit more clarification on that. What's a default event? Is that an event that would be you missed a mortgage payment or 2 mortgage payments or 3 mortgage payments, or when the first letter comes from your mortgage lender to say that they're sort of giving you a first warning about repossession, or is it at repossession? And given the fact that the department then will be a creditor, is that requirement to pay back the loan with the person still? Because if the repossession has taken place, any profit will go to the bank. It'll not go back to the person who has had the house taken from them.
No, I think that are good points, Kelly. We can certainly go back and ask those, absolutely. Any other member, any comments or content that we move on? No? Okay. Next agenda item is agenda item 6, which is a briefing. I don't see Mark Durkin wanted to kind of bring Mark in first before we move away. Mark, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Chair. I did try to get in when we were on it. It's one of the disadvantages to Starleaf, and there are plenty of them. And it's not even on the mortgage interest one, it's the previous one on the HC1 form.
Yeah.
It's just, in terms of the help that is available to people with health costs, it covers the costs or contributes towards the costs incurred by a patient. But I'm not sure it covers like the expense for a parent visiting an ill child in hospital, and that there isn't support for parents who find themselves in that invidious and awful situation. I don't know, could we maybe write to the department seeking clarity on that? I know it's a health issue, and I have been in correspondence with the health minister on it, but I think it's something that would certainly need to be looked at.
Yeah, no, we can ask those questions because I know from a health perspective as well that many of those, the Children's Hospital and things like that, will provide free parking for parents and things like that. That'll be not their travel costs, but certainly the parking charges. So yeah, I think that's worth asking. Certainly, Mark, no problem. Oh, and Ciara has her hand up. You want to bring Ciara in? Go ahead, Ciara. Ciara, you're on silent.
I just thought it might be useful to ask the department, maybe just to forward the Department of Health to forward the criteria for it, so we can review all the criteria once again.
Yep, good point. It would be good to have that information as well. Yep, we can do that. Okay, any other members have any questions before we move away from matters arising? I'm looking for your hands up and there's no more. That's okay, all right. Our next session then is agenda item 6, which is the Northern Ireland Fire and Rescue Service briefing on the Private Tenancies Bill. Now, I don't know if anybody else can. We know we have Jeff Somerville and Paddy Gallagher. I did see one of their names there a minute ago, but it's dropped off. And there's a mobile number with no name attached, so I assume that's maybe one of them. I don't know if anybody, any sign there? Because I don't want to move on if we don't have both of them there I can move on quickly then to, let me see, where are we?
Agenda item 9.
9, okay. Well, let's move on to 9 while we wait for them to come in. Maybe we were running slightly ahead of time, I don't know. Okay, members, if you could move then, jump to agenda item 9. which is support for mortgage interest, security of loans bill. Members, you've been provided page 76 with the signposting ad for this bill. As this bill is only 2 clauses, we're not planning to use the online citizen space that we have used for our larger bills, but no request on the committee's website, but 2 requests on the committee's website that people send in their comments on the bill. Summary information on the bill will be provided on the web page. Are members content for the signposting ad to issue and to get the call for evidence underway on that? Yeah, content with that? Good, okay. Then I will move to agenda item 10, which is SL1 State Pension Revaluation for Transitional Pension Order. You'll find a copy of this SL1 at page 78. The Pensions Act Northern Ireland 2015 introduced new state pension for people reaching state pension age on or after the 6th of April 2016. This proposed rule revalues protected payments to reflect increase in the general level of prices since the 6th of April 2016. Do members have any comments? Are they content for the department to proceed to make the rule? Are members content? If you raised your hand, if you're not content, I assume. I haven't brought if you want to bring people in for this, just while we do this session. There's Mark has his hand up. Mark, did you want to say something on this? Mark, you're on mute.
Sorry. I don't think we've much choice other than to make the rule, but it was just as an aside that I'd been raising with the Minister for a couple of years now in terms of this increase to the state pension age, and she had indicated to me and I believe the committee that she was exploring options as how to reverse this increase. I wonder, could we write there and ask her, to expand on what she has done in that regard and where we're at.
Okay, yep, we can do that, but we're still content to go ahead and make the rule, yeah? Yes?
Yeah.
Mark's frozen there, I think, so he has frozen. All right, members, I'm just checking to see who we have in for next, no, they're not there. Paddy keeps coming on screen and then dropping off, so I don't know whether there's an issue or not there. Yeah, okay. Moving on then to agenda item 11, which is SL1, the Occupational Pension Revaluation Order, Northern Ireland 2021. You'll find a copy of this SL1 at page 83. The proposed rule specifies the percentage by which preserved pension rights are revalued for members of salary-related occupational pension schemes who leave the scheme before pension age, or called early leavers. The rule has to be made each year to apply to those who attain their scheme's normal pension age in the following calendar year. This year's rule will affect people who reach the scheme's normal pension age in 2022. Again, I'm going to ask members, have you any comments? Are you content that the department proceed to make this rule? Content? Content. All right, thank you. Agenda item 12, SL1, the State Pension Debits and Credits Revaluation Order, Northern Ireland 2021. You'll find this SL1 at page 88 of your pack. The Pensions Act Northern Ireland 2015 introduced new state pension for people reaching state pension age on or after the 6th of April 2016. The proposed rule revalues new state pension scheme debits and credits to reflect price increases since the debit or credit was created. Again, members, any comments? Are content for the department to proceed to make the rule? Content?
Content.
Okay. Then we have an urgent agenda item, which is an additional SL1, the Universal Credit Work Allowance and Taper Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021. Members, you'll find a copy of this SL1 in your tabled papers. The Department of Communities proposes to make a statutory rule under powers conferred by the Welfare Reform Northern Ireland Order 2015. The purpose of this statutory rule is to provide for the beneficial changes to the work allowance and taper rate in universal credit announced by the Chancellor of the Exchequer on the 27th of October 2021. This taper rate is being permanently cut by 8 pence from 63p to 55p. And the work allowances, if the whole household receives housing support or if they do not, are both being increased by £500 per year. The statutory rule is subject to negative resolution procedure before the Assembly. So can I ask members if they have any comments? Are they content for the department to proceed to make the rule? Content? Content? Thank you. Another urgent agenda item, which is another additional SL1, the universal credit exceptions to the requirement not to be receiving education amendment regulations Northern Ireland 2021. You'll find this SL1 also in your table papers. The purpose of the proposed rule is to amend one of the exceptions from the requirement to not be receiving education under Regulation 14 of the Universal Credit Regulations, Northern Ireland 2016. This amendment provides that a person who is entitled to attendance allowance, disability living allowance, child disability payment or personal independence payment must have been determined to have limited capability for work before they started undertaking a course of education. Again, members, can I ask if you have any comments, or are you content for the department to proceed to make the rule?
Content.
Content? Yes? Okay. Let me see if we got, I think we've got our two people there. Is that, I know we've seen Paddy's name up, so we do.
Chair, there's just one more SR.
Well, then we'll just do that.
Please.
Okay, then. If we move to agenda item 13 then, which is SR 2021-298, Occupational Personal Pension Schemes, Conditions for Transfer Regulations, Northern Ireland 2021. You'll find a copy of this rule at page 93 of your pack. I then want to ask members, have you any objections to the rule?
No.
No objections, and I'll put the following, that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2021-298, Occupational and Personal Pension Schemes, Conditions for Transfers, Regulations, Northern Ireland 2021, and subject to the Examiner of Statutory Rules report, has no objections to the rule. Okay, there's Paddy Gallagher's job dropped off again. I don't know what's going on with Starleaf this morning.
That mobile number ending 422 is what he has as his mobile, so I'm trying.
Okay, well then we'll hold on, we'll go back then and we'll see. So members, if I take you back then to agenda item 6, which is a briefing from the Northern Ireland Fire and Rescue Service on the private tenancies bill, and you'll find the briefing paper at page 45. So we think that might be Paddy there, so if we could bring that in.
Good morning, Chair, members. Apologies. Can you hear me?
I can indeed. Paddy, is Jeff joining you this morning, or?
Yes, just by way of introduction, I'm the Assistant Chief Fire and Rescue Officer Service Delivery, Paddy Gallagher, and I have with me Group Commander Jeff Somerville, who's our Group Commander for Protection, and would be our subject matter advisor in relation to all aspects of fire safety, and would have been involved in the input during the development stage of the bill. So, happy to go through our opening statement, if you're content, Chair.
Yes, Paddy, is Jeff then in the room with you?
Yes, I am, yeah.
That's okay. It's just we were looking for two different devices, but that's grand. That's great. No problem. Look, go ahead.
Okay, so thank you. So Northern Ireland Fire and Rescue Service interest in the private tenancy bill relates to Clause 8, fire, smoke and carbon monoxide, and Clause 10, electrical safety standards regulations. Clause 8 is intended to reduce the risk of injury or death caused by fire, smoke and carbon monoxide in private tenancies. And Clause 10 will assist to prevent the fire from starting due to an electrical fault, in addition to preventing electrical accidents. During the development stage of these proposals, the Department of Communities consulted with us, and we were encouraged, that the advice we provided is fully reflected in the final bill. One of the core functions of NFRS is to promote fire safety by providing advice and encouragement about the steps to be taken to prevent fires and death or injury by fire. The proposals made by Clause 8 and Clause 10 will assist greatly in that regard. NFRS are the enforcing authority for fire safety under the Fire and Rescue Services Order 2006, which applies to the majority of premise types. Domestic premises, which include private tenancies, are excluded from NFRS enforcement remit, provided the property is not classified as a house in multiple occupation. A house in multiple occupation is defined by the Houses in Multiple Occupation Act, Northern Ireland 2016. In a house in multiple occupation, district councils are the enforcing authority for their licensing and operation, and NFRS are the enforcing authority for fire safety. The installation of automatic fire detectors is required in new houses, flats and masonettes in order to satisfy building regulations. In existing houses in multiple occupation, the installation of an automatic fire detection and fire alarm system is required by NFRS as the enforcing authority for fire safety. On the 1st of April 2019, when the Houses and Multiple Occupation Act NI 2016 came into effect, a number of types of premises were removed from definition of a house in multiple occupation. This change meant that they would no longer be regulated by district councils through licensing or by NFRS in respect of fire safety. Some of these premises types that were removed include, for example, a house converted into flats and student accommodation where it is provided by a specified educational establishment and it is accredited by ANUK or UNIPOL. The Private Tenancies Bill will assist to once again protect tenants and reduce the risk from fire in these premises types when operated by a landlord. The standard that applies for smoke alarms is British Standard 58396/2019, Fire Detection and Fire Alarm Systems for Buildings, Part 6, Code of Practice for the Design, Installation, Commissioning and Maintenance of Fire Detection and Fire Alarm Systems in Domestic Premises. The justification for requiring smoke alarms to be fitted in domestic premises is well described in the introduction to the British Standard, which states, I quote, "In the United Kingdom, around 80% of all fire deaths and injuries occur in domestic premises, over 300 deaths and around 9,000 injuries per annum. Many of those who die are the most vulnerable in the community, namely elderly and socially deprived people. The installation of a fire detection and fire alarm system in premises can substantially reduce the risk of death or serious injury from fire. Indeed, the overall downward trend in annual fire deaths in domestic premises since smoke alarms in the domestic premises were first given recognition in BS 58391 in 1988 is almost certainly attributable in part to the increasing use of smoke alarms. The level of deaths and injuries remains, however, above a level that society regards as acceptable. It is being estimated that in premises without smoke detectors, a substantial proportion of the fatalities from fire could be avoided if smoke detectors were installed. The fatality rates in fire in premises in which there is no working smoke detector is between 2 and 3 times the fatality rate in fires in premises in which a smoke detector is present and functioning correctly. The Health and Safety Executive for Northern Ireland are the lead authority for carbon monoxide detection, and NFRS also supports the proposals in this regard. The proposals in relation to the electrical safety standards will assist to prevent fires from beginning due to an electrical fault, and NFRS also support this proposal. To conclude, NFRS fully supports the proposals made by clauses 8 and 10 of the Private Tenancies Bill, and we offer our full support to assist and advise as new regulations and guidance to support these clauses are developed in due course. So that's my opening statement, Chair, and Jeff and myself would be more than happy to take any questions from members.
That's grand. Paddy, look, thank you. Thank you for your briefing and thank you for your paper. It's extremely important that we do get a briefing from yourselves, and it's good to know that also that you were working along with the department on the development and it's reflected in the final bill. I just want to, if we go back then to clause 8, it doesn't specify what alarms must be installed and the locations. Do you think that that would be something that we should be looking at, that there should be specification put down there? I know throughout this bill we have words like minimum standards and things like that, which I hate. I don't think any of us should be looking at minimum standards. I think we should be looking at the very best standards we can possibly enforce. What would your views be on that, Paddy?
It's Jeff Somerville here. I'll answer that question. Yeah, we would strongly support that. Supporting guidance supports the bill. I think the bill, as it's worded, is entirely appropriate. And really, where it comes to the specification for alarm systems, that would be in a separate piece of guidance or in a separate regulation. And really, what you're looking at there is a fire alarm system that mirrors what is required by building regulations since 2012, where a smoke alarm is required to be installed in the ground floor and on every landing level in a property, and a smoking alarm installed, and we call it the principal habitable room, which effectively is the living room, and a smoke alarm then in any high-risk rooms, if there is one, such as, for example, a boiler room inside a house, and a heat alarm in a kitchen. And of course, since 2012, there was a requirement for these all to be hardwired into the electrical wiring system of a property. We would very much support that, because we find that battery-operated alarms tend to be subject to not being checked as regularly, etc., and that would give a lot more comfort when landlords wouldn't be visiting premises on a regular basis. Now, the one option that we could discuss with the department is about interlinking smoke alarms. There is new technology there to allow smoke alarms all to be interlinked, so that, for example, if you had a fire in your kitchen, it would also alert the smoke alarm in the bedroom through a radio signal. And certainly in older properties, that's quite difficult to arrange that. But we would fully support that those new technologies are used, as is the requirement in Scotland, for example, in that smoke alarms should be interlinked. So to really just summarise what I'm saying there is that the clause as it's worded in the bill is entirely appropriate for the overall order. And then we would greatly support, more clarification then provided either in a supporting document or by a regulation as to what exactly then is required in the premises. So hopefully that answers your question there.
It does, Jeff. Look, thank you for that. And just to follow on from that, and you might not have this information, which is fair enough. Do you know offhand the percentage of private rentals out there that are still have that old battery type smoke alarm? Would you say that is still the vast majority of private rentals? Yeah.
Well, any property built since 2012 will have hardwired smoke detection in those locations as required by building regulations. But of course, the majority of the housing stock in Northern Ireland would be older than that. And so there would be a fair few properties that has only got battery-operated alarms, or in fact no alarms at all. And where it's got no alarms at all, that's really not providing any assurance for tenants and those related to the tenants. I mean, what we're going to see here is this private tenancies bill will affect 132,000 roughly properties will now be required to ensure that they've got working smoke alarms in them. And that is just such a massive enhancement. So there is a very mix out there as to whether there's battery-operated alarms, whether they're hardwired into wiring systems, but we wouldn't have a percentage to be able to accurately report on that. Unfortunately, we've no data on that.
No, that's no problem. It was just in case you did. Just want to move on then to the issue around HMOs, where you've said that this bill will assist to once again protect tenants. Then about information sharing. Do you think that there should be something put in about information sharing by the fire service and local councils in respect of potential failures to adhere to the new requirements?
Well, I'm glad to say that because the proposal is that councils will enforce and check that these smoke alarms are in properties, there wouldn't necessarily be a need for information sharing, because it could be information overload for the fire and rescue service, in that really enforcement and action should be taken at a local level so that the district council can ensure that that property is brought up to standard. That's the same way that we operate currently with HMOs. So if there is an issue with an HMO, for example, we are the enforcement authority and we would address and follow that up. And We have very good liaison relationships with the Northern Ireland HMO unit in that regard, but of course we're only talking about 4,500 properties there, whereas this is now talking about 132,000 properties. And from a liaison point of view, there wouldn't be that need in order to tell NFRS if there's an effective smoke alarm in a property, because due to simply the numbers of properties involved.
Yeah, I suppose whenever you put those figures out, it would be absolutely overload for the fire and rescue service if they had to go around and action and check all of those properties. Just on again, you might not have this information either when it comes to HMOs. How often are you alerted to incidents within HMOs around lack of smoke alarms and other fire safety?
Well, I'm glad to say that HMOs are very highly regulated in Northern Ireland, and actually we find quite a small number of properties that don't have effective alarm systems in them. So on the Northern Ireland Fire and Rescue Service website, we have an HMO guide that stipulates clearly what the fire safety standards in an HMO are required to be, and then that is reinforced by the Northern Ireland HMO unit when they are licensing a property. Before they issue a licence, they will confirm that the person is aware that that fire safety guide is there, and if they identify any shortfalls, they'll inform NFRS of that. So I'm very glad to say that the numbers of offenders in that regard are quite low, and we would only see, I would say, a handful of referrals from the HMO unit back to NFRS on an annual basis. And we do periodically inspect a number of HMOs as part of our risk-based inspection programme, and then we'll follow up on any that need action taken in that regard. So certainly the scheme works extremely well for HMOs.
That's good. Thank you very much, Jeff, for that. I'm going to open up to members. I have Kelly has indicated she wants to ask a question. Go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Paddy and Jeff. I just want to tease out a little bit more, now not necessarily HMOs, but where you have a case where there's a block of flats and a private landlord is renting out one of those flats. I'm just wondering, do you think it should be within regulation then that those private landlords, it's about, I'm thinking about the shared hall or the shared pub, shared spaces. Who takes responsibility for that, and should that, or do you think that will be shared out or provided for in the regulations?
The shared space in those type of properties sits with the owner of the building, and it's up to them to ensure that that space is maintained and maintained at the appropriate standard. Now, in that shared space, if the property has got measures installed for the protection of firefighters, such as firefighting shafts, smoke systems, or roller shutters or fire doors, things like that, in that common area, the Fire and Rescue Service can enforce those facilities for the protection of firefighters. But in a private flat, the landlord should be required to ensure that there is working smoke alarms in the flat, as is identified by the Private Tenancies Bill. In the common areas and the rest of the property, then the British standard that would recommend that each flat is maintained as a self-contained unit, and there actually is not a requirement to have a communal smoke alarm in certain areas of common flats, and that's appropriate. And really, flats are designed that a fire should not spread beyond the compartment of origin, and we have very good examples in Northern Ireland where fires are contained and we have not seen fire spread beyond the flat of origin. Of course, everybody will think of the Grenfell disaster, which was a very extreme case, and is thankfully something that I would not expect ever to happen in Northern Ireland, because we have done a rigorous programme of inspecting high-rise properties in Northern Ireland, and we have not identified dangerous cladding in to the same extent in Northern Ireland as occurred in England. So it's a very, very different picture in Northern Ireland, in that the number of premises that we're dealing with is a lot lower in terms of high-rise premises. And really just coming back to the main point in that, and in those premises, we enforce rigorously the facilities for the measure of firefighters, which provides quite a bit of protection in those properties.
Thank you very much. You're the first person who's actually given me clarification on that. Much appreciated. That really does help. So there is responsibility. It is the building owner, and that helps quite a bit. No, thank you so much. That's all I have, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other member? Paul, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for your very detailed presentation on the two clauses, Clause 8 in particular, and then of course on the Clause 10, which is basically an enabling clause. I'm keen to explore what 10 could mean. I've asked series of questions throughout this evidence on this bill around electrical testing regime. Can you tell me just off your top, now I'm an electrician by trade and I should know this, but I just want an up-to-date picture. What is the current requirements for domestic properties with regards to testing regime, especially around the EICR?
Yeah, in domestic properties there is no testing regime. After a property is handed over from building control, unless there's a material change made to that property, then there wouldn't be a supplementary check done in the electrical system. So it would only be if that property was having a significant change where they then put in a building control application, there would be a follow-up check of the electrical system at that point. So currently in domestic properties, there would be no checks carried out in that, which would also apply then to private tenancies. And of course, Clause 10 now is suggesting that a 5-year fixed wire installation test should be carried out, which again will afford superb protection to the tenants of those properties and mean that the properties and the people in the properties are much less likely to suffer the risk due to an electrical fault. And those risks are twofold. Of course, electrocution is one of the main risks, but also a fire starting due to potentially faulty electrical equipment. That clause is designed to eliminate that risk, or certainly bring it down to as low as what is reasonably practicable.
There's no statutory, and thank you very much for your expertise here. There's no statutory requirement, but is there guidance? Is it like a 10-year, 15-year advisory note that people should get their domestic properties tested?
There's no guidance that I know of in that regard. The electrical wiring regulations and all that guidance is a tomb of information, and it would be out with my level of expertise. So my understanding is that in domestic properties there actually isn't any requirement after a property is built. But I would stand to be corrected in that. I don't know the detail enough, but I'm reasonably sure that's the case.
I'm not sure what edition we're at now with the regulations. I can remember doing courses on 19th edition, so I don't know where we're at. I'll probably show my age there. Can I ask then, in your experience, and it's great to have evidence from you guys, in most of the deaths or injuries and the fires, as you've said, being caused by electrical faults, is it your experience that it's mostly the electrical wiring or the actual appliances plugged in? And if it is the appliances plugged in, are that the stationary white goods, or is that items portable equipment like radios, hair dryers, hair straighteners, aspects like that?
Yeah, I mean, the portable appliances would be beyond the scope of the bill. The bill is really talking about that fixed wiring electrical installation to ensure it is as safe as possible. It would be beyond the scope of the bill to actually go and look at private white goods. And we are seeing quite a number of fires arising due to, for example, imported telephone chargers, that kind of stuff where people is buying these equipment online and it's not necessarily having the correct kite mark and correct certification as would be required in the UK, for example, because it's coming from overseas. So I would say that the items plugged into the system would be beyond the scope of the bill, and it wouldn't necessarily be appropriate to have legislation in place to that effect because of the disruption that would potentially cause to tenants. which would not be appropriate. But it's certainly the whole scope of the bill is about trying to make the property as safe as it can possibly be, and a fixed wiring test is one very, very good step in that regard. So we do see fixed wiring installations that cause faults. We see consumer units going on fire, and particularly sometimes in the hot presses, for example, we can see fires arising due to faulty thermostatic heating water supplies. That's the type of incident where we get that would be connected in relation to the fixed wiring type test, and of course the private tenancies bill then would assist to eliminate those.
Yeah, I've been exploring the idea if we do put an onus on the landlord, and I think we do need to put that onus on the landlord. I would worry then about the portable equipment too, and I know you're saying it's outside of the scope of the bill at the present time, but should it be? Because if there are going to be tests, and a question I would have is, should it be 5 years, or should it be every other time the landlord registers, which I think will be 6 years, if I'm right? Is there a big difference between 5 years and 6 years, where it could be quite a... Well, going 5 years and then registering every 3 years, you can see there where you'll be out of step. So for the sake of a year, and to regulate it more greatly, if you like, with regards to you can only be registered if you have this test every other time, would that be acceptable to you?
Look, I think that is acceptable. It's all about what is reasonably practicable for the industry. And also, one very key consideration is about making this easy to implement by the district councils. So whether it's 5 years or 6 years is less of a concern. What is more important is that there is actually these periodic checks being carried out, and that certification is provided as part of the tenancy. And of course, one of the main items of the tenancy bill is that it effectively will self-regulate, in that a complaint can be made by a tenant if they see, for example, a faulty smoke alarm, the fact that the fixed wiring test is now out of date, for example, because that information will need to be provided to the tenant, and then they can make a complaint in that regard. So one of the very important aspects of the bill is making sure that it is not too onerous on councils as well in order to administer and run the bill. And I think the measures that's in there currently are appropriate in that regard.
Whilst it should be the responsibility of the landlord to make sure that their premises is safe, is there a danger that by having a stated time, 5 years or 6 years, that if there is a fault occurs within 1 year, that there's danger that the landlord may neglect that and wait for years until it's a time to get tested?
No, well, I think the key aspect there is that if a fault occurs, for example, within 1 year, and the tenant is making a complaint to the local council, at that point in time, the local council could potentially ask for a further fixed wiring test to be carried out, which would be appropriate in the circumstances. So, and that will be one of the avenues open to protect against such a scenario as that arising.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that final question. So you're saying, just to be clear, that there shouldn't be a requirement for PAT testing periodically?
I just think that would be a very difficult item to manage, because most of the portable appliances within properties would belong to the actual tenant, and therefore would be very, very intrusive and actually very, very costly to the industry to bring that in and organise it. So from purely a practical point of view, I don't think it would be appropriate for the scope of the bill in order to bring PAT testing in for appliances, certainly that don't belong to the landlord, for example. But of course, what the Northern Ireland Fire and Rescue Service does is part of our fire safety advice is we provide significant amounts of advice about using safe electrical appliances, and we're continually beating the drum about how to make sure that there's plug sockets are not overloaded and that they're using reputable equipment, etc. So really all that stuff comes down to our prevention message that we put out, and again that can be supported by messaging published in support of the bill.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Paul. No other member has indicated they want to ask anything further. So can I then just thank you, Jeff and Paddy, for your time with us today. It certainly has been very beneficial to us, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, bye-bye. Okay, members, we're going to move on then to agenda item 7, which is a briefing from Electrical Safety First on the Private Tenancies Bill. You'll find this paper at page 52 of your packs. And then can I then welcome Martin Allen to our meeting? Hi, you're very welcome to our meeting today. Can I ask you then to go ahead and brief the committee, please?
By way of introduction, I'm Martin Allen, Technical Director at Electrical Safety First, which is a UK-wide charity committed to reducing deaths, injuries and accidents caused by electricity in the home. Thanks for inviting me today to give evidence on the Private Tenancies Bill. I know some of my colleagues have already been liaising with members to discuss the electrical safety aspects, and we appreciate the positive engagement that we've had to date. Electrical Safety First has long campaigned for a uniform level of protection for private tenants throughout the UK, with mandatory 5-yearly electrical safety checks now being in place both in England and in Scotland. We therefore welcome the Private Tenancies Bill, which will enable regulations to be introduced in relation to electrical safety standards in the private rented sector in Northern Ireland. While we appreciate that much of the detail will be contained in the regulations, we believe the bill could actually be strengthened by including a specific interval for periodic electrical safety checks of at least every 5 years. This proposal will provide certainty for tenants and clarity for landlords and industry. It also brings regulation into line with the laws already in place for houses in multiple occupation in Northern Ireland. Clearly, these costs the proposal would fall on the landlords in terms of costs, but we don't believe they're unreasonably burdensome. The average cost of electrical safety inspection is around £200 every 5 years, so as little as £40 a year or 80 pence a week to protect both tenants and the landlord's property from electrical risk. Turning now to the details of the electrical safety standards, we believe they should require landlords to have periodic electrical inspections and tests undertaken at least every 5 years by a suitably competent and qualified person. And that should include the provision of an electrical installation condition report, which records details and outcomes of the inspection and testing of the installation, the fixtures and fittings. It also recommends remedial work that may be required and a declaration of whether the installation is indeed safe for continued use. We also believe there should be provision of a record of inspection and testing of appliances provided by the landlord, and that those reports should be actually provided to the tenant within 28 days of those inspections being completed, also to any new tenant before they occupy the property, and prospective tenants within 28 days of receiving a request. We also believe that district councils should receive a copy of the reports that have failed the inspection and testing, along with confirmation of any remedial work that's been completed to improve effectiveness of enforcement. We suggest there should be a transitional period for the introduction of any electrical safety regulations that would help landlords and the electrical industry to prepare for the efficient and effective rollout of the requirements. We think you should consider an approach that was taken in Scotland. That required new tenancies on or after the date when the regulations came into force to have a valid safety inspection, but for existing tenancies, landlords had a year to comply. On the enforcement and compliance aspect, we broadly support the proposed measures. New Article 11K in Schedule 3 is welcome, as it requires landlords to rectify the remedial actions identified in the inspection and test. We would, however, recommend imposing a period of 28 days to complete those remedial work on receipt of the condition report, as is the case in England. A key point that I want to make is that landlords must be able to easily identify and get access to a qualified and competent person to undertake the safety checks. In Scotland and in England, regulations promote the use of an electrician registered with a government competent person scheme. I don't believe such a system operates in Northern Ireland, but we are aware of the Trustmark scheme, which is promoted by the NI Direct website to help consumers find electricians locally. And in the Republic of Ireland, SAFE Electric provides a list of registered electrical contractors. So there seems to be merits for exploring options to make sure there's a central information source for landlords to get access to inspectors. We believe the department should also provide statutory and technical guidance to accompany the introduction of electrical safety regulations, again as was the case in Scotland and in England. That type of approach helps promote higher standards within the private rented sector and offers a clear opportunity to provide important information to tenants about the role that they play in keeping their property safe from electrical risks. So to close, we welcome the Private Tenancies Bill and the commitment to introduce periodic electrical safety checks. However, we believe the bill could be strengthened by including a specific interval for the periodic electrical checks at least every 5 years, which would indeed provide clarity for landlords and certainty for tenants. Thank you very much. That's my opening statement.
Thank you very much, Martin, and we really welcome you being here with us today. And you'll know if you've been following, one of our members is an electrician by trade who has asked lots of questions, so I'm going to let him lead on this, but I just want to ask one question before I start. And your paper states that you'd welcome the opportunity to work along with the Department on statutory guidance. Just to ask, does the Department not consult with you at the moment on these issues?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we keen to develop as much guidance as possible. That is the route to success of implementation of any regulation, both from information for landlords but also for tenants to show what they can do to help keep their installation safe.
Okay, so as I'd asked there, is that already happening, or is that something that you want to do going into the future?
That is ongoing, but we're keen to do more of that, to provide as much of our expertise as we can to help develop that guidance.
Grant. Look, I'm going to go to Paul now and put him on the spot here.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Chair. So, again, declaring interest as an electrician, approved electrician, out of the game for about 12 years, just to clarify that. You state in your presentation, Martin, that EICRs and PAT testing has been required in Scotland's PRS since 2015. Explain to me what PRS is.
The private rented sector.
Right, okay. So that's been since 2015. So I think what I'm exploring is, whilst I know the need for a testing regime to bring in safety, I'm grappling with the idea, should it be only EICR or should it also include PAT testing? And if it does include PAT testing, and to be fair to our last presenters, they said no, would have been outside the scope of the bill, they thought. But if PAT testing is involved by regulation, statutory requirement, how deep that PAT test is, so should it be just stationary white goods that are in the ownership and responsibility of the landlord, or should it also be for all portable equipment owned by the tenant? And whilst they say that, there's obviously an onus and a burden would be placed, both financial and regulatory, on both parties at that point.
I mean, that's operated in Scotland, both the installation and appliances, since 2015. It's worked really well. It offers the highest level of protection. So we believe that appliances should be included in the legislation for those appliances provided by the tenant as part of the tenancy, provided by the landlord as part of the tenancy. I think it's more tricky and challenging to include the tenant's own equipment because that can change on an almost daily basis. However, the guidance I mentioned in my opening remarks would be the ideal place to get information out to tenants to take care and responsibility for the items that they have in terms of registering their appliances, responding to recalls and just general housekeeping. But we firmly believe that the appliances that are provided by the landlord should be captured in the legislation. Even if that was to be left out, there's still an overriding health and safety responsibility and duty of care on those landlords to make sure that they're dealing with all electrical risk. So even if they're not included in the legislation, they still should be picked up elsewhere.
Yeah, thank you for that. You say, I think, in your paper that it should be, the requirement should be every 5 years and no more time duration. Would you settle, and can you see the the rationale for doing it every other time a landlord has to register, which I think at the minute will work out at 6 years. So I know you say no longer than 5 years, but is that where the compromise, whereby you can tie it up with registration?
Yeah, I mean, there was at least every 5 years, and I say at least because if a property is of a certain age and demonstrating certain characteristics, you might want to look at it more frequently than 5 years. But the 5-year maximum would align with other of the devolved nations, so there's sort of parity and consistency there. However, the point that you make in terms of every other time when a property is registered, that would lead to 6 years, and an inspection on 5 year, it wouldn't be exactly on the day or unlikely to be so. So it would seem a sensible compromise if that would help to get something in place. I mean, ultimately, I think as the comments were made previously, the previous speaker, that we just need some fixed regime in place to make sure the electrical risk is being dealt with in the private rented sector. So 5 years, 6 years, there's not really much in it in any case.
In your experience, and I'm scrolling down through your presentation, in your experience, do you have any percentages of cause of fire? Is it stationary white goods? Is it the installation itself? Is it portable equipment, hair dryers, and that was raised today, faulty phone chargers, which we all own, I think. We all own the faulty charger. So have you any percentages of causation?
Yeah, when we look at the information available, then about 60% of fires are caused by appliances, predominantly misuse, but also sort of faulty appliances as well. So it is a mixture between the appliances and the installation. So that's why we don't believe they should be completely ignored. If they're not captured in the legislation itself, there's still a need to make sure electrical risk is pure responsibility by the landlord, that those risks are mitigated. And the best way to do that is by having some regime of formal inspection and testing.
So when you say 60% of causation is appliances, are you then saying that 40% is installation?
Well, yeah, by pure mathematics, that would indeed be the case. Yeah, just based on the information that is available to us.
And is that causation of all fires, or is that causation of electrical fires?
Electrical fires, that's all accidental fires, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Martin, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. No other member has indicated they want to ask anything of Martin. If you do, would you raise your hands now? I don't see anybody with their hands raised. So there you go. Nope, that's it. Look, Martin, thank you. Thank you for your briefing paper, and thank you for joining us today. Another invaluable witness session, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, I am just at this stage going to propose that we take a very, very short break just to prepare for the next witness. Thank you.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29.